Desire expresses the essence of man. The eternal wisdom of God has manifested itself in all things, and especially in the human spirit, and most of all in Jesus Christ. A thing does not cease to be true because it is not recognized by many. All people are born unaware of the causes of things and that they all have the desire to seek what is useful for themselves, which they are aware of. The first consequence of this is that people consider themselves free, since they are aware of their desires and their desire, but about the causes, who dispose them to this striving and desire, they do not dream even in a dream, because they do not know them. The second consequence is that people do everything for the sake of the goal, precisely for the sake of the benefit to which they strive. Hence it follows that they always strive to know only the final causes, causae finales, of what has happened and are at peace when they are pointed out to them, without, of course, having any reason for further doubts. If they are unable to learn them from another, then they have no choice but to turn to themselves and see what aims they themselves are usually guided by in such cases, so that they necessarily judge by themselves other things. Teeth for chewing, plants and animals for nourishment, the sun for illumination, the sea for feeding fish, etc. Hence it came to pass that they regard all natural things as means to their own advantage. They know that these means have been found by them, and not prepared by themselves, and this gives them reason to believe that there is someone else who has prepared these means for their use. In fact, having looked at things as means, they could no longer think that these things made themselves so. But by analogy with the means which they usually prepare for themselves, they must have concluded that there are some rulers of nature, endowed with human freedom, who have taken care of everything for them and created everything for their use. As to the character of these rulers, since they had never heard of it, they had to judge by their own. As a result, they suggested that the gods arrange everything for the benefit of people, so that people would be attached to them and give them the highest honors. Any love that is not caused by the freedom of the spirit, but by something else, easily turns into hatred. Every definition is a negation. Souls are not conquered by weapons, but by love and generosity. If you want life to smile at you, give it your good mood first. Some think that God is a free cause, because he can, in their opinion, make sure that what, as we said, follows from his nature, that is in his power, does not happen, in other words, does not. But this is the same as if they said that God can make it so that from the nature of a triangle it does not follow that its 3 angles are equal to 2 right angles, or that an effect does not follow from a given cause, and this is absurd. Knowledge of the effect depends on the knowledge of the cause and includes the latter. As soon as you imagine that you are not able to do a certain thing, from that moment on, its implementation becomes impossible for you. When you're alone, you need to know exactly who you're staying with. Everyone has the right to the extent of the significance of his strength. People believe that they are free only in so far as they are allowed to obey their passions, and being forced to live according to the prescription of the law, they think that they are sacrificing their right. People are aware of their desires, but do not know the reasons by which they are determined. And in order to explore what pertains to this science with the same freedom of spirit with which we usually treat the subjects of mathematics, I constantly tried not to ridicule human actions, not to be upset by them and not to curse them, but to understand. No one is so prone to envy as people who are self-abased. No one is so greedy for flattery as that ambitious person who wanted to be the first, but could not become one. But, in an effort to prove that nature does nothing in vain, that is, what would not serve in the benefit of people, it seems that they proved only that nature and the gods are as crazy as people. Look, I beg you, to what, finally, among so many conveniences of nature, they should also have found many inconveniences, such as storms, earthquakes, diseases, etc., and it was assumed that this happened because the gods were angry with insults inflicted on them by people or errors made in their veneration. And although experience has daily declared against this, and has shown in innumerable instances that benefit and harm fall indiscriminately to the lot of the pious and the wicked. Nevertheless, they did not lag behind the deep-seated prejudice, the use of which people did not know, and thus preserve their present and innate state of ignorance, rather than tear down the whole edifice and invent a new one. Therefore, it was accepted as a truth that the decisions of the gods far exceeded the human faculty of understanding, and this, of course, would be the only reason why truth would forever remain hidden for the human race, if only mathematics, which deals not with goals, but only with the essence and properties of figures, did not show people a different measure of truth. Experience too often proves to us that people over nothing have so little power as over their own language. A free man thinks of nothing less than death, and his wisdom consists in thinking about life and not about death. Competition is the desire for something, which is born in us under the influence of the fact that it seems to us that others desire the same. Thus, if one wishes to conclude from the aforementioned absurdity that an extended substance must be finite, then, rightly, one does the same thing as if someone imagined that a circle has the properties of a square, and would conclude from this that a circle has no such center, so that all lines drawn from it to the circle are equal. The doctrine of the end completely perverts nature. It looks at what actually constitutes the cause as an effect, and vice versa. Further, that which by nature precedes, it makes subsequent, and, finally, that which constitutes the highest and the most perfect, it makes the most imperfect. Indeed, omitting both first points, which are self-evident, it is clear from volumes 21, 22, and 23 that action is the most. But if the things directly produced by God were created for the attainment of God's purpose, then the last things, for which the first were created, would necessarily surpass all others. This doctrine destroys the perfection of God, for if God creates for an end, he necessarily strives for that which he does not have. They confess that God created everything only for himself and not for the sake of things that have to be created, because before creation they can indicate nothing, except God himself, for the sake of which God would act. Therefore, they must necessarily agree that God was deprived of that for which he wanted to prepare the means, and willed it, as is self-evident. I must confess that the above opinion, which subordinates everything to some indifferent will of God and makes everything dependent on his good pleasure, deviates less from the truth than the opinion of those who believe that God works everything under the idea of good. Apparently, they believe that outside of God there is something independent of him, to which God refers in his creation as a model, or to which he strives as a certain goal. And this, of course, is the same as submitting God to fate. But it is more absurd. Nothing of this can be said of God, who, as we have shown, is the first and only free cause both of the being of all things and of their essence. I am convinced that no man has ever risen to such a height of perfection as Christ, to whom were revealed, not in words and not in visions, but directly, God's commandments leading mankind to salvation. God revealed himself to the apostles in the mind of Christ, as before to Moses by a voice in the air. Therefore, the voice of Christ, like the voice that Moses heard, can be called the voice of God. In the same sense, we can say that the wisdom of God, that is, that wisdom that is higher than human, in Christ took on human nature, and that Christ is the way to salvation.